This episode of the Beer Bound Podcast is brought to you by Rolling Hops Beer Tours.
Hey everybody, Garrett here from Rolling Hops, as always joined with my partner,
Andy.
We're here to tell you guys about our virtual craft beer tour offering. With what's going on in the world, unfortunately, we haven't been able to run our historical craft walking beer tour, so we've pivoted to taking the virtual experience of craft beer directly to you guys. Wonderful for team building events, corporate events, even just a night out or in, for that matter, with your friends and family. And we're doing this online.
Have any questions about the beer tours or want us to tailor make an event for you? Just shoot us an email or send us a message on any form of social media. Rolling Hops, you can find us everywhere.
RollingHopsBeerTours.com is where you can get a hold of us, and we'll see you guys soon.
Cheers.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Beer Bound Podcast. We're excited to be joined by Marc Plante, co-owner of Stray Dog Brewing Company. One can find Stray Dog in Orléans, Ontario, just outside the nation's capital of Ottawa. Our guest today, Marc Plante, alongside friend and co-owner Justin MacNeill, both started out independently as home brewers. Their common passion for well-crafted beer, cool indie music, and a desire to chase a dream led them to many discussions of one day starting a brewery of their own. The dream became a reality in July of 2017 when Stray Dog Brewing Company officially opened its doors in Orléans, becoming the first microbrewery in the neighborhood. The Stray Dog Brewing Company is more than just craft beer. It represents the spirit of adventure and the courage to pursue the passions that enrich our lives. So we look forward to learning more about Stray Dog Brewing. So without further ado, we welcome Marc to the Beer Bound Podcast. Hello, Marc.
Hello, Andy. Thanks for that amazing introduction.
Yeah, finally, I got it out. Can you start us off, Marc? Tell us about yourself and the wisdom that you have gathered through everything to do with beer. Tell us about yourself.
Oh, wow. Where do you start? My background, believe it or not, is not beer. Although I did work in the restaurant industry for a long time, about 14 years or so, and moved around Canada quite a bit, worked in different hotels and resorts. And I moved back to Ottawa and realized that I just can't keep working in restaurants with these crazy hours. And I was in a relationship, and she was working during the day, I was working at night, and the restaurant industry could be pretty cutthroat. So I made a break, went back to school, went to Algonquin, took public relations, did very well, and I was in the communications industry as a career, probably for about 20 years or so. I started off like with some event planning. We got into some media relations, some speech writing, social media, all that kind of stuff. And so that was kind of my life. But in the background of that, I've always been a fan of beer. I was that guy when I was like my 19, 20, 21, going to house parties. And of course, you'd open the fridge and there'd just be like one row of Molson Canadian and one row of Molson X, and then there'd be like a couple of Laurentide or O'Keefe or something because I wanted my beer to stand out, because I didn't want people ripping off my beer that I brought to the party. And then that really just kind of evolved into different styles of beer. So back when I was in the early 90s, there really wasn't a lot of choice. And so anyway, yeah, it was a lot of like off-brand macro kind of stuff. And then it was really when I moved out to Lake Louise in about 1991. I had my first taste of trad, Big Rock. And so if you've never had traditional, it's amazing. It's a really great amber style beer by Big Rock, and they weren't as big as they are now, obviously. But they were my first sort of craft beer, and just kind of rolled into rolled into that. So I can always talk about how I got into making craft beer, but essentially what happened was I was working for many nonprofit organizations. My last job, actually about 13 years, I was in it at Canadian Blood Services. So a great gig, love the people, love the cause was great. I did a lot of really fun things. Like I used to speech write from the CEO. I used to do media relations, which I liked, internal comms, which is good. So a lot of writing, a lot of communication, communication stuff, and beer. And when I started homebrewing, became just like a hobby. But just like a lot of large organizations at Blood Services, there was a lot of changes going on. And I had seen friends come and go due to the reorganizations. And I came to a realization that I didn't want somebody else to be making career decisions for me. And so luckily I had homebrewing and a passion for it. And I was either really brave or really stupid to just say, screw all this, and I'm going to get into brewing beer for a living. But it wasn't just like overnight or anything like that. I actually worked for a company part-time when I was at Blood Services called Brew Donkey. It's very similar to what you guys do. In the GTA. Brad?
Well, we've communicated via social media. Yeah. Brew Donkey, love it.
Cool. Yeah, I love Brad. He's a great guy. And to be honest, he took me on as one of the first official tour guides for Brew Donkey.
Oh, cool.
He wanted so he was just getting into craft beer, but he didn't know how beer was actually, really made, like not all the nuances of it. And at the time, I was a home brewer, and I was part of a larger homebrew group in Ottawa called the Members of Parliament, also known as the Mob. And so we touched base through the Mob, and we touched base through that, and he asked me, would you mind hosting a bus full of craft beer lovers, and just kind of herd the cats a little bit, try to be the most sober one or responsible one on the bus, and talk about how beer is made, and just entertain. Like, absolutely, I love this kind of stuff. So I did that, and I did it off and on, like part-time, like I said, for about 3 years or so. Could have been a little bit longer, but one reason was because great opportunity for me. I get to meet, hang out with other people who love craft beer, and eventually actually started paying me to do these things. So I'm like, okay, whatever, that's great. I just take that money and I'd spend it on other craft breweries. The craft beer industry in Ottawa was really like just blasting off, and so I got to know a lot of the brewers and the employees and a lot of the owners, frankly, of all the places in and around Ottawa. So that was really cool, and it really cemented my belief that this is where I belong. This is what I want to do with my life. And I wasn't blind to the fact that it's a lot of hard work, but I'm like, man, I got to get into this somehow. Mm-hmm. So all that to say, I met a lot of really cool people, and that just kind of fueled my drive to get where we are now. Now, I had mentioned the Members of Parliament. So it was about 300 to 400 members at the time. Maybe it's probably grown since then, because the homebrew community is continuously, blowing up. So because there's so many, and Ottawa is quite large, I mean, it's pretty spread out, we would kind of have these little regional mini mobs, I guess you can call them. And so in the East End, so Orléans and whatnot, we were known as the Dweebs. And that it was an acronym for drinking with East End brewers. That's what happens when you have home brewers who are also engineers. I love
Like,
acronyms and cool names like that.
you have like little
So,
rival gangs in Ottawa.
yeah, exactly. Like you'll have like the South Side guys and like the West End and then the East. It really, you can actually kind of see that, on a fun scale, when there used to be like homebrew competitions, and you'd see like the list of people who would win awards and stuff, and you'd be like, oh yeah, these guys are from the East End, these guys are from the South Side, that was always pretty cool. You'd see a lot of the same names, which was neat. But it's actually how I met my friend and business partner, Justin MacNeill. And that was through one of these meetings with the dweebs. So what we would do is, I think it was about like once a month, maybe, we'd go to somebody's house, they would host it, and we would either bring our best or worst homebrew, or if we didn't have any of that, like if nobody had brewed anything, you just bring something out of your cellar and you just kind of pass around and share. So it was like, just a bunch of guys. It was all guys. And yeah, we were just sharing beers and, sharing stories and learning from each other. And so the reason why you would bring your worst homebrew beer is because oftentimes there would be members of the little group that were actually BJCP certified judges. Right. So if you don't know what that is, obviously, I mean, it's a beer judge certification, and they go through a lengthy process to get their ranking. And they judge not only commercial brewing competitions, but a lot of home brewing competitions. And so basically you say, okay, what's this infection? Why does it taste like this? And then somebody in the group would say, oh, it's because of this. You might want to try increasing your temperature. Might want to add some Camden tablets to your mash tun, your striking water, whatever, you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, as a home brewer, or as a brewer, you always want to improve and make the next batch better than your last one, kind of thing. And so that's how Justin and I met. It's a very long-winded road to get to where we are right now, but that's actually how we met, was through a dweebs meeting, and we just kind of hit it off. And then we actually realized that at the time we only lived like around the corner from each other. So it was really cool to meet up. So we'd have our own sort of meetings.
That's really cool.
That's an
In
awesome
terms
story.
of, the dweebs, like just coming together and sort of self-educating yourselves. Did you do that for, Mark, did you do that for several years? Like how long did those meetings take place for?
So I was homebrewing for about 6, maybe 7 years, something like that. Maybe not even as long. It seems like it, but at least 5 years for sure. And then and Justin about the same. And so that's about as long as I was part of the members of Parliament. I actually joined the mob. I never even knew they existed until my son started playing baseball, and one of the assistant coaches was a home brewer. And when there was like the end of the year party, like everybody's saying, oh, you got to come to the end of the year party because this guy Andy makes his own beer. And I'm like, oh yeah, so did my uncle, who, back then, I mean, it was all shit, right? So it was really hard to get excited about it. But when they were telling me like, no, he really makes good beer. All right, cool. So I remember showing up to this party, and they said, yeah, the beer is in that gazebo over there, and it's in the recycling bin. I'm like, okay. So I walk in, and there's like a green bin. So, like the tall green organic bin. Inside it, well, sorry, before I even opened it up, there's a tap handle, like a draft tap handle sticking outside of this. It's a jockey box on wheels. I open it up, and there's a corny keg inside filled with ice. I'm like, all right, this guy's got it going. So I grabbed a solo cup, poured myself a pint. It was I think it was all, like, it was an American pale ale using almost all Amarillo. Anyways, probably one of the best beers at the time that I had ever had. And so when I went up to Andy, I'm like, dude, this is amazing. You made this? He's like, yeah, I do home brewing, and I'm asking, like, I'm peppering him with all these questions, like, how do you get involved in this? How did you get started? I was picturing like a bunch of like nerdy dudes, like wizards or a cauldron making beer, and and quite the opposite, actually. He invited me to his place the following Friday, and he says, look, winter's coming. I'm brewing beer now every Friday until it gets cold, because I need all this beer for throughout the winter time for my keezer downstairs. So he invited me to his place. I went to his place probably like, I don't know, 6, 8, 9 times, taking mental notes, asking him questions, and just learning how to make beer. Like, it was unbelievable. Just changed my life.
That's really cool. I guess there's no better way than to learn the craft than like just, having almost, I don't know if maybe you'd call him a mentor per se, but like, finding someone
totally
who's doing
would.
a good thing.
I would. Yep, I would absolutely. Yeah, because even when I started making my own beer at home, like I went from stovetop extract. It was my first batch, and then from there I went to brew in a bag, and then I did some Festa kits just to keep the pipeline going until I was built my own 3-vessel system in my garage. I went from a 5-gallon to a 15-gallon. And then, that was it. Like it was all consuming, just because I love not just the end product, but I love the process of making beer. Like, if I got up at Saturday morning or it was a Sunday evening, that was like those 6 to 7 hours of me making beer. That was like my Zen moment, like that was me and the process. And then of course, the big reward comes, 28 to 35 days later, when it's fully carbed and you take that first sip and then you share it with somebody and they're like, you made this, man, that's awesome. That gives you an indication that you're kind of on the right track and you're doing it right.
That's awesome. I guess it's got to be a pretty euphoric moment, after you're putting all that hard work in, you're in your element, and at the end of it, it's not someone just going like, oh yeah, okay. But someone's like, yeah, like this is top-notch stuff. Like, that's got to be a pretty awesome moment.
Yeah, and it's not just your friends and family. After a while, like you're giving it to your neighbors and just strangers, and then now people are saying like, can you do beer for my wedding, or whatever, or can you bring in your latest into work? That was always fun too. But yeah, no, it was really cool. And then the other thing too, and going back to the whole the BJCP thing and homebrewing competitions, it's kind of when we started. We independently, meaning Justin and I, we were submitting our beer to a lot of different competitions, and so we started seeing each other's names in the results. Like sometimes he would win, sometimes I would win. I think Justin won a lot more than I did, but the whole point, though, was not really about winning, placing, losing, whatever. It was always about the amazing feedback that, again, you would get from these judges. So you get the score sheets back. So you got their impressions. And then, and I've judged a few of these things. So I know the process where they wouldn't just put a number next to like, that category. But there's a section for notes to say like, this is why I found it this way. This is where some areas that you can possibly improve. So again, it comes right down to being a better brewer and making a better end product, because I can still remember the first, extract beer that I made on the stovetop compared to probably the last, saison I made on my homebrew system. And they're vastly different. And trust me, I wouldn't want to drink that first one again, but it didn't kill anybody. So I guess it was not that bad.
Yeah, that's a good start at least. Yeah. Mark,
to that point,
no deaths. That's good.
Sorry, Andy, I cut you off. I wanted to continue on that. So it sort of sounds like, when you had your initial experience with BrewDonkey, that was sort of your aha moment for like, being in the craft beer industry, and like you really found that to be a spot that you wanted to be. And then you moved on to, brewing your own beer and finding the mob and things like that. Where was that sort of aha moment when you, after, being with your mentor and doing your own brews and progressing, forward, where was that aha moment where like, hey, you know what, we could do this as a full-time thing. We could do this as our own brewery. Was there an aha moment or something to that effect?
Absolutely. So when I met Justin and we just kind of hit it off, we and realizing we lived so close to each other, some nights I would walk over to his place, some nights he'd walk over to my place, and then we'd do the same as we used to do in the small little dweeb meetings where we drink beer, sit around the kitchen table, and it would either be homebrew or a combination of like our homebrew and then some of the stuff that we, that was in our cellar, or the best was like going to like an LCBO or something that had a good craft beer selection, grabbing a bunch and say, have you tried this? Nope. Split a can of that. What are your impressions? What do you think? That was just a fun evening, with a good friend. But those conversations fueled by alcohol evolved into some pretty dope ideas to the point where we actually started writing stuff down and saying, like, how can we make this happen? And so it's funny how ideas for some people evolve into a business plan and then, a bricks and mortar type of thing. But because we were very cautious, like, Justin was working also at a not-for-profit, but he was doing very well as, in that spot. It was the Canadian Center for Ethics in Sport. So they were always really, really busy during the Olympics, right? Because they dealt with a lot of the Canadian athletes and doping. So so we both, at the time and through our discussions, like, we both enjoyed our jobs. We had, pension, we had health benefits and all that kind of good stuff. But it's not something that we wanted to do for the rest of our lives, kind of thing. So so that was that. So at least we were in agreement with that. And then we started coming up with, like, okay, we've been to all these breweries, we've talked to a lot of people, we know what kind of beer we can make, we have a vision. How can we make this happen? And so, we weren't ready to quit our jobs right away, because we weren't ready to get our wives to sign off on second mortgages and maxing out credit cards and all that good stuff, asking friends and families for loans. We didn't want to do that at all. So we thought, okay, how can we do this on a small scale for now, and then build a following, get some money, and then use that to, our seed money, basically, just to get that going. So we had an idea that we had taken from another local brewery here in Ottawa. So they were called Stockpot Ales at the time, and they were running out of a kitchen of a really great restaurant called the Wellington Gastropub. So basically what they would do is, I think one of the guys, they used to work there. And so they would get access to the kitchen after hours, and they would use stock pots. So very DIY. They would make and brew and ferment all the beer on premises and then sell it solely at the restaurant. And so I thought that, hey, that's pretty cool. And again, at the time, which is really not that long ago, maybe, I don't know, like 6 years ago, I guess, there weren't 35 breweries in Ottawa. There was maybe 15 or 20. And so whenever you heard a new brewery, regardless of how big or how small it was, people were like super stoked to go and try it. So they made some pretty good beer. And then they've actually evolved into Stalwart Brewery in Carleton Place. So shout out to them, because not only did they give us this kind of great idea, but they were also really, really great in helping us with information and sharing a lot of info while we were getting our business plan together. So fast forward to, approaching several restaurants with this concept of doing a stock pot type thing. The first one, we were all set to go. We had a meeting one day. We went to the restaurant, and there was a lock on the door and a sign, and they went under. So there went that idea. Yep. And then the second one was, again, friends of ours. They were opening up a restaurant. We approached them with the same idea. It was going to be, the planning took too much time. His timeline was way more aggressive than ours. We were going to come in with doing basically just like pumping out like 1 barrel worth of beer each time, probably taking up unnecessary space within his restaurant that he didn't want. So we agreed not to pursue that, which forced our hand to say, you know what, let's just go big. Like, let's not start small. Let's just try to find a way to go big. So we put a business plan together. We got some of our best homebrew together, and then we started talking to some people. We basically interviewed some potential investors. They in turn interviewed us. We got them a little tipsy, and we found the right ones that believed in us. Yeah, it was a hard sell, but I mean, you know, that's what happens when you're trying to ask strangers to give you money, and you know, basically believe in your vision. But we're very fortunate that we did have enough people that believed in us, and then they were able to give us some money. That in turn we were able to go to our lenders, and they gave us the rest of the money. But it couldn't have been done if we hadn't have agreed begrudgingly to do contract brewing first.
Right.
So that's kind of how we started. Actually, was before we even had 501 Lacolle Way open. We had actually approached Forked River in London, Ontario, because one of the guys, Andrew, was part of the mob, and then he moved to London and helped open Forked River. But they made really good beer. You know, they were good guys, and we had a good conversation. We talked about the concept of contract brewing with them. Not for a very long time, but kind of as a means to an end. We knew that they would respect the recipe, and they would use their expertise to make sure that it turned out to be the best product that we would want. And so that was really cool. That's kind of how it all started, really.
That's great. Happy it
Beautiful.
worked out.
So,
Yes.
Mark, when did you start contract brewing then? So the doors opened up in 2017. When did the contract brewing begin?
So we would have in 2016. So we are incorporated in February of 2016. We actually released our California Common, called this one, in November of 2016. So probably September, I guess, is when we started talking to Forked River. October would have been probably when they started making the first batch, and we started getting the first cans and kegs. And so we would get that delivered to an offsite cold storage here in Ottawa. And on the week, during the week, I would leave my job at lunch hour. I'd take my Mazda CX-9 SUV, and I would bring it to the cold storage, and I would load it up with like 30s, a couple of 50s, and a couple of cases. And I would drop them off to accounts that I had previously gone to, and said, hey, you know, we're a new brewery here in Orleans. Why don't you carry us? That'd be great. And we, you know, had 4 or 5 accounts, but you know, that filled up my entire lunch hour. And so that's really what we did until actually even when we right through until we opened the doors in July, because once we got the equipment in and we started brewing our own beer, the first beer we didn't want to come out with under our own equipment was the Cali Common, because Forked River had been doing it up till then. And seriously, going from a 15-barrel homebrew system to a 15-gallon to a 15-barrel with no experience using a commercial system is a daunting task, to say the least. So we really didn't want to screw up our own recipes. So we just decided to do a pale ale, because the whole idea with a pale ale is if we had screwed up even a little bit and it was like higher in alcohol or too hoppy, we just call it an IPA, and we meant to do it. And if it was less, we just call it a session IPA. So it actually ended up, you know, it ended up being a really great beer, and it still is one of our main 3 beers, but also it set the baseline for all other beers using that equipment.
Right. Got your feet wet with the new big stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. Anyways, and then I think maybe the third type of beer we did was we decided, okay, now I think we can do the Cali Common, and so we did it. And then we kept Forked River around a little bit longer just to make sure we had a steady supply. And then once we, you know, had our supply chain all in lockstep, we were able to get rid of the contract brewing and keep, you know, that money to us.
Of course.
Love that. Yeah, Marc, has your in the 6 years of running the brewery, have your roles and responsibilities, have they changed at all? Is it pretty much kind of the same as what you've been doing the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, so my role has changed quite a bit, I think. Whereas Justin's is I think exactly the same since day one. And that's great for us. So when we all started, nobody was getting paid. We were relying on a lot of friends and family to help us out. So, when we opened up in July, we still had our full-time jobs. And so, we would, the brewery was only open like certain hours and on the weekends. So working the counter and then brewing. So I just helped, like Justin and I were brewing the beer. We were each working the counter. We were canning. And so that was our lives. And then we'd go home, sometimes at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And then we'd wake up at 6, 7 o'clock, go to our full-time job, and then do the whole thing over and over again. And it wasn't until probably October of 2017 where I was able to quit my full-time job and to do the brewery full-time. And then like a couple of weeks later, Justin did the same thing, because at the end of the day, that was our goal from the very beginning, was not to have this working on the side of our desk type of deal, but to quit our full-time jobs and do, follow our passion basically. So that was a big thing. And secondly, if you don't put 110% into your business, it's going to fail right from the get-go. So that was kind of the how we got to the point where we are now.
That's great.
Yeah, it's really cool. So are you still, how do you manage?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So
yeah.
I was going to say, did I answer your question? No, I don't think I did. So has my role changed? Yeah. So I don't work the counter anymore.
You still brew,
Marc.
You're still the brew.
I don't even brew, dude. I don't
Wow.
even freaking brew. But that's the great thing, because Justin's and my role within the brewery really kind of evolved organically, So he really started taking over the brewing aspect of it, and I really started leaning towards the business development and the operational side of things. And so that was kind of where I really started to gravitate towards. And because I like being out front, and for some odd reason, I became the face of Stray Dog. And so, and Justin, as well spoken, I think, and as intellectual as he is, he likes to be in the background, and he really he puts a lot of time, a lot of research and effort into improving his own craft. And so, so he just fell into being kind of the head brewer, and I became the sales guy and the hype guy and the media guy and all that kind of stuff. And so, funny enough, now my role has evolved again. So I'm back to the delivery guy, but I'm also the HR guy. I pay the bills. I'm definitely the operational guy, and that's why, like, a lot of my roles has grown as the business has grown. And Justin, like, he's fantastic. Not only does he brew the beer, but he manages a packaging team, and he does a lot of the QA kind of stuff. So pretty much everything back of the house is Justin, and everything front and public facing is me. But at the same time, it's very much an equal partnership, where we collaborate a lot and discuss a lot of the ideas, whether it's a style of beer or beer name or the direction of the business. So that's one great advantage of having a partner like him to work with, is you always have somebody to bounce ideas off, and we're not afraid to, if we don't agree, we'll state that we don't agree, and here's why, kind of thing. But I think those types of conversations always make for a better end product and a better business partnership. So,
Marc, I'm interested about what you said a little while back about begrudgingly you had to contract brew for maybe a year, maybe less than that.
Yeah.
Why did you use that particular adjective?
Yeah, no, that's because, you know what? I mean, at that time, there was a negative connotation to contract breweries, especially amongst the home brewing community. They're pretty they can be pretty savage and sometimes a little judgmental, rightly or wrongly, whatever. But I think the I don't know, the perception, I guess, is that you have a name and you have a logo, but somebody else has made the beer, but they're putting it under your name and your logo kind of thing, right? And so I wouldn't say it's disingenuous if you're upfront and you're honest with people and you're saying, yeah, this is our beer, but we have so-and-so making it for us. Okay, whatever. At the end of the day, I don't think people really care, who made the product in your can, depending on how you're presenting yourself. But there are some companies or some businesses, I guess, that went into contract brewing because there's no skin in the game really at that point, right? Like I could still be working my full-time job and I could still be pushing out, our Cali Common under Stray Dog, and then everybody would be happy and I wouldn't have all these tireless evenings and dealing with pandemic crap and tap room stuff being closed and whatever else, right? I wouldn't have to deal with that. But when you have that skin in the game, when you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into your business, when you finally got that bricks and mortar spot, and you have your identity and your personality all built into that business, that to me, that's what drives people, I think, to the craft beer industry and to craft beer itself, and why they are so important to the community, because they in turn reflect what that community is. Do you know what I mean? And so when we have the brewery and when it's open, I always like to think of it as like a nice little community hub where everybody's welcome and everybody comes in, and there's no better feeling and there's no better sound than people laughing and chatting and drinking and just having a good time. And you can't get that when you are when you're faceless, basically, when you don't have a place to go. Because I don't know how about you guys, but when I grab a beer, like, and I look at where it's made, I want to know, like, okay, well, next time I'm in Bayfield, I'm gonna check those guys out, you know what I mean? Or if I'm in Etobicoke or whatever, if I'm in friggin' anywhere, like even in the States now, like I want to make a pilgrimage to certain places because I want to meet the people who make the beer. I want to feel the vibe. I want to see what else they're about, and their brewery is a reflection of who they are. And that's what we wanted. So yeah, begrudgingly, because we didn't want, like I said, contract brewing was a means to an end for us.
Yeah, good way to describe it. I like how you described it. It's like, just you want to feel everyone's vibe, and you really get the full sense of that when you have a location to go to and sit down and experience it. So it's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and I mean, I can sit here and I can shit on other, contract breweries, but maybe they're making a lot more money than I am. So really, who's the idiot in this conversation? But at the same time, I can live with myself, and I can look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, it's hard, it's a struggle, and it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. So, you know what, whatever floats everybody's boat, right? But for me personally, it was really all about, being true to ourselves and our vision, and being a place that people can come in and talk and experience.
I like that.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't know. I think this is a biased impression. I think Garrett and I would both agree that we do when we're even at the LCBO or a beer store looking at a beer can, I associate that can with its location. And if it's a contract beer, I'm probably less, again, maybe a biased opinion, probably less interested in purchasing that beer just because it doesn't have a sentimental attachment like the others that have a physical location and that have faces behind the product.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I also want to take back, I said begrudgingly was an adjective. It's an adverb. I need to correct that. Yeah. So that's maybe I think you have such a great, Marc, a great history and a great experience with home brewing. And you did touch on sort of how you built that kind of in small, steady steps. If someone wanted to enter home brewing from the very beginning, could you give us sort of your 101 crash course in maybe 2 minutes of what someone would need in order to get their feet wet and get things going with their home brewing project?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the first step, if you're really interested, and it's not uncommon to hear, where people will get a kit as a gift. So here in Ottawa, we have a place called DeFalco's. It's like it was always a winemaking place, but then they evolved into beer supplies to take home, obviously, because you can't do it on site at those places. But now I think a lot of major cities have like a wine and beer supply store. If not, highly recommend looking into Ontario beer kegs. They don't sponsor me or anything like that, so I'm willing to share that information. But yeah, walk into one of those places and say, I want to start brewing beer. And there's a couple of options. The easiest one is obviously to buy a box, and it'll say, I think there's still Festa kits. It'll say Fest on it. So inside this box is almost 5 gallons of already made wort. And it comes with its own yeast pack. And then you just have to buy the hops to go with that style. And most places will be able to sell those hops. And then you just buy yourself a little bit of a kit. So really, to start off with, all you're going to need is a brew bucket. So 5-6 gallon bucket, hydrometer, wine thief, couple of carboys, some sanitizer, and then you're pretty much off to the races. So that's one way you can do it, and that's probably the easiest way. So with the Festa kit, I feel like a spokesperson for these guys. They should really pay me royalties. You open up it's a bladder of wort. You take that, you pour it into your brew bucket, make sure it's sanitized. You put your yeast in it, stir it up, and then you're going to pour it into, you're going to let it ferment in said bucket. You got an airlock. Once it's done fermenting, you're going to put it in your carboy, and then you're going to go and you're either going to keg condition or bottle condition. But there's so much information. There's so many resources on YouTube. There's some great programs online. I used Beersmith almost predominantly.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah, Beersmith is awesome. How to brew beer. There's so many great resources out there on your own. But really, join a club, join a local club, talk to other home brewers if you can join the club. Talk to them, because everybody is so open and welcoming and willing to share their ideas. And talk to some breweries as well, because once you start getting to know some of those people, I mean, a lot of us are I mean, even just when you were talking to other people, like I'm sure you've talked to owners and brewers who started off as home brewing. So for the most part, we're all pretty good people, pretty good men and women in the industry, and we're very open and honest, and we're very passionate about our craft, and so we're more than willing to impart any knowledge that we've got. And that's basically what I would say is, if you're going to get started into home brewing, go that route.
No, good. It sounds like there's like, you could take the longer, more intensive route with investing in the equipment and the knowledge, but you could also sort of ease your way in from what it sounds like, which is good, depending on, and any potential new brewers' intensity.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, it's I think just like with every sort of hobby or passion, you don't start off with some people will start off with a Brewzilla or RoboBrew, and then but that wasn't around when I started, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was still very much like 2-vessel, 3-vessel, a lot more hands-on and a lot less automated for homebrewing. But you also have a lot more control on what goes into it, right? It's the difference between making a pot of chili and using an Instapot or whatever, like it's a lot more hands-on. But yeah, you know what? I mean, I don't know. It's just a fun great thing to do. And I've always maintained that anybody can make beer. I mean, you can do it in prison, for Christ's sakes, but not everybody can make great beer, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So it really is an evolution with time and energy and interest in it. It's either going to be a passing fad and a hobby for you, or you're going to go all in. And once you do that, then you start spending like hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars for your homebrew system. And like, I've seen some homebrew systems that are nicer than commercial ones, like unbelievable stuff out there. You know what I mean? So it really, you can make, but that's at the end of the day, in a glass of beer, you can't tell me whether that was made with a $500 homebrew system or like a $500,000 system. You know what I mean? Like it's still the same product at the end of the day if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good way to put it. What was the first beer you brewed as a home brewer? I think you mentioned it earlier. I can't recall if that was and did you continue that style over on?
As a home brewer, I did an amber, and I tried to do an American pale ale using Amarillo because I was inspired by what I had with Andy. So yeah, they were pretty good. They're all right.
And what did you have that in mind, or was that just sort of like, like you said with a kid, just maybe that's the one you had to brew, or did you have a progression? Like, I'm going to try this style first and then this style next and then something.
Oh yeah, it's basically, okay, what's easy and what can I not, what's the least way to screw something up, because I'd never done it before, like, you're going to make scrambled eggs before you make a quiche, right? So that was kind of what I did was I made kind of the easiest one possible. And then after I started doing a little bit more and started doing a lot of research, I started doing styles that I really like to do. So that's when I started getting into doing IPAs. And then when I started doing stouts, and then dabbled into saisons and then doing decoction and all that kind of stuff too. And, and then really starting to experiment with different styles of yeast and whatnot. So that's kind of how it took off.
Good progression. I did want to talk a little bit, obviously we're talking to you from Stray Dog, and talk about the beer. And maybe more specifically, the one you brought up a couple times already, like your California Common. And that sounds like one of the first beers that you brewed. So maybe you can tell us why maybe that's the one you chose, and a little bit about the style, because it's not very popular, at least in Ontario, from what we've seen.
No, it's not very common at all. I'm glad you asked. So so the California Common, it was actually Justin's idea. He made it as a homebrew beer. I really liked it. I thought it was pretty cool, and I'd never heard of what a California Common was either until I went to the LCBO in the fall in Anchor Brewing Company out of San Diego, I believe. They came out with Anchor Steam. And so I'm like, oh, that's a California Common. And then Justin made his, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, man. And then we sent it into, we brewed it, and then we sent it into a couple of homebrew competitions. One won first place in its category, and then another one, it won best of show. So we thought, okay, now that we're opening up Stray Dog, what's the first beer we're going to come out with? We are hop heads at heart. So, do we come out blazing with a big hoppy IPA, not even knowing exactly what we're doing? Probably not a good idea, because of first impressions and whatnot. You really don't want to screw that up. And so what we liked about the Cali Common, but just a lot of things actually, other than the fact that it's a really great beer, it's for a craft beer, I would say it's fairly approachable. And so craft beer geeks like myself, we appreciate it for the style and the historical significance, which I can talk about in a bit. But the other thing too was we didn't want to come out with something that everybody else is doing, like a cream ale or a blonde. You know what I mean? It just seems very cliche. And so we really wanted to stand out from the beginning, and it was very calculated on how, as a new brewery, how do you stand out amongst all the other new breweries? So you come out with something that's not going to piss people off, because an IPA is either, it's it still is fairly divisive, right? You either love them or you don't. But this is a beer, again, like I said, it's like the weed of craft beer. It's a great gateway beer into all the other possibilities that are offered out there. So that's why we chose the Cali Common over something like a pale ale or a blonde. And when we started doing our research too, and then we realized like this is not a style of beer that people are very accustomed to, but the story behind it is really interesting, and I think people would appreciate it. So funny enough, as an amber style beer, that is got a little bit more flavor than your average sort of typical amber. It's really done well for a still, you know what I mean? And it's one of those things where it can be enjoyed on the hottest summer day or the coldest winter night. So that's why it's such a versatile, such a versatile beer for us. It's great.
Definitely got to check one out and try it. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds delicious. Marc, I want to shift a bit to what you spoke about, what we were talking about earlier about community, about location. We were speaking a few weeks ago to Dave Longbottom, the owner of Flora Hall Brewery. Perhaps you're familiar.
Love Dave. I love Dave.
Yeah, he's great. And
guy.
he spoke very highly of Ottawa. And obviously, Garrett and I know that craft beer in the nation's capital, it's such a huge part of the culture. Definitely now in the past decade or so, it's really just kind of taken the city and the surrounding area by storm. A lot more than some other places, I would say. Like, it just seems like the culture is just, it's so hot right now, craft beer in Ottawa. Can you tell us why? What is it about the culture of Ottawa that has instilled this massive boom? I mean, it's suffice to say that craft beer is big everywhere in Canada, but Ottawa seems to have a particularly nuanced kind of boom to the city. Can you tell us a little bit about why you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, again, I could be talking out of my ass here, and these
Please
are only
do.
my own observations. I feel like Ace Ventura. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's if I were to kind of look at it and to sort of look at the landscape based on my own impressions. So first of all, like you've got Ottawa is a very diverse city. So we're a city of 1 million people, which may or may not sound like a lot. If you're in the GTA, it's not, or Montreal. But for a lot of other cities, it's pretty big. But at the same time, it's very spread out. So you've got a good mix of urban and rural. There are, got Carleton University and Ottawa University. So you got two major universities here. You've got an English college in Algonquin. You've got a French college in the city collegiale. So you've got per capita, I think, access to secondary education, which means you also have like higher education, which turns into people stay here, higher than average income. I can certainly say that for Orléans anyways, but I think if you were to average it out over Ottawa, and again, we're very diverse because we are not officially bilingual in Ottawa, but it's certainly, because you have the federal government house here, and then the city of Ottawa strives to be bilingual. So get a lot of those services. So you got a lot of different cultures and backgrounds and stories. And, it's really neat in Ottawa where people sort of compare it to it's a big city with a small town feel to it, right? And so to that end, I think we really strive to support local when we can, because it does have that small town feel. We tend to know these business owners or people that run a business. You know what I mean? It's easy for us to go from the East End to the West End to the South End to chase farmers markets or whatever the case may be. I think we're just kind of open and interested and welcoming to different things. And so that's the beauty about craft beer, is that every microbrewery offers something different. They have their own spin, their own persona, their own characteristic to the beer, to the marketing, to the taproom vibe, whatever that case is. And by and large, I think Ottawans really gravitate to stuff like that, and they've never hesitated to support smaller local businesses in a, you know, predominantly federal government town, you know, like, so in that respect, I think that lends a lot to why there's so much support, I guess, and also willingness to try new things.
I like that. That didn't sound like you were talking out of your ass at all, Mark. I will say.
Well, that's good. If I actually did, it would be more like a, you know, and nobody would understand.
Yeah, might be difficult to comprehend. Well, believe it or not, Mark, we're coming up on our hour mark, but I did want to ask you a little bit about plans in the future for Stray Dog. It's nice actually that we've made it through this hour with not talking about the last 2 years, which no one really wants to talk about, I'm sure, but maybe we can look forward. We can look forward to what you guys have in store, maybe for 2022 or the next couple years, or what have you. Can you tell us maybe some up and coming events or projects or whatever you can tell us?
Yeah, I mean, not to or look back into the last 2 years at all, because I mean it's been talked about to death, and again it's changed everybody's growth, you know, and plans. So, you know, we cautiously plan ahead now. You know, we were regaining some of that momentum. So we don't have a very big space, but it's a very unique space, and I've always imagined breweries as destinations, right? And so what I love about the tap room is that it's not just a place for people to sit down and have a beer. You should use it to host events, and you should use it to allow people to use it for, you know, whatever they're going to use it for, birthday party, gathering, small stuff like that. You know, we can fit about 50 people in there. So it's kind of that nice little sweet spot for a good social small gathering kind of thing. But we were one of the first breweries in Ottawa, if I'm not mistaken, that actually started hosting comedy nights. So that's one of the things where I would love to get back to. I always joke that I got to do things at the brewery that I wasn't allowed to do at home. So I'm a big proponent and a big fan of live comedy and live music. And so we started, you know, we were on the regular. We were having comedy nights. We were having live music. We would have, you know, paint night, euchre tournaments. We hosted Alan Cross, for Christ's sakes, like 2 days in a row. Cool. That, which is probably one of my highlights of my brewing career, was having that man sit and talk and do Q&A. Oh, how can you not, man? Like, seriously, like, dude's awesome.
Guy just captivates you with his voice.
Yeah, it's true, right? As soon as you hear it, like, you're just drawn right in.
Yeah.
That guy is just such a wealth of musical knowledge. He's the best. So yeah, we can't wait to get back to doing that kind of stuff again. And also, you know, because of our hours, we don't do food or anything like that. So we generally close at around 9 o'clock, but we can adjust our hours if somebody wants to rent the space after hours to do, you know, their own private party. We just started doing hip hop nights too. Like, these are all things where I just want to get back to where we were, because I feel like we lost so much momentum that we almost have to, I don't want to say start from the beginning, but remind people what made our place so fun and so unique to get back in. I mean, God, we used to have an anniversary party in the parking lot every summer. You know, we'd have 400 or 500 people in there, which was fantastic. We've missed 2, going on probably 3. So we definitely want to be able to, you know, celebrate. Hopefully we can celebrate our 5th anniversary this coming summer. That's kind of in the works. And beyond that, I mean, you know, we've made an impact in Ottawa, but at the same time, there's still a lot of people, even within Orléans, that don't even know we're here. So we want to continue with, like, just growing that awareness, letting people know who we are before we start expanding across Ontario, and just being very, very careful and calculated, and, you know, slow and steady kind of wins the race, right? So
it's true.
That's what we're doing. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to say that we're going to be releasing our gold-winning Pilsner, hopefully at the end of February or early March, called Jagged Little Pils. Jagged Little Pilsner won the Canadian Brewing Award Gold for Best Pilsner a couple of years ago, and so we like to bring that out. We don't do a lot of lagers because they take a lot of time, but this is our slow season, so we have room in the tank to kind of let that sit and stew for a good month and a half, 2 months. So pretty excited to have that coming out soon.
Awesome. I'll have to check it out.
That's really cool. Well, Marc Plante.
We do Ontario shipping, so
we'll
have to get you beers.
All right,
we'll have to send you guys some beers so you can.
Well, we're gonna make a trip up to our nation's capital soon, so we'll let you know well in advance, Marc, and we'll come by.
Yeah,
obviously,
you're always welcome.
Thank you so much, Marc Plante from Stray Dog Brewing in Orléans, the suburb of Ottawa. Marc, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with Garrett and I.
Garrett, Andy, thank you so much. This is a great way to spend a Wednesday evening. So thanks and continued success to you guys too. And like I said, our doors are always open to you.
Cheers, thanks. Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Marc. I want to say too, you said an expression that I was not privy to. You have to make some scrambled eggs before you make a quiche. I'll remember that one. I like it a lot.
Good one. Yeah, I'm going to use that.
I like it a lot.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers, Marc. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all our interviews and beer-related content. Remember, craft beer is here.